We're going to have a total of 13 chairs to fill. We are going through the process of meeting with the people who are interested in those positions and chatting with them, and we'll make some announcements mid to late next week about who will fill those positions, and we'll get kind of down to business. So it's an exciting time here. First time in 20 years that we have had an inaugural with both a new governor and a new lieutenant governor. So got some change coming. I'm excited, and I know all of our folks are. So we'll take a few minutes and let just chat, see what if I could address anything that might be on your minds, and I always enjoy and look so forward to this day every year. So who's first?
Speaker Ralston, can you talk a little bit about this Committee on Quality Health Care that you may be appointed to? Do you see them having any recommendations for this legislative session, or is it more like something we're looking for next legislative session? Can you just talk a little bit more about what you want from this committee?
I want them to work very hard this session. I'm not putting a deadline on their work. You know, this is an issue that we have kicked around here for many years in this Capitol. And it's my view that it's time that we kind of drill down and sort of let Georgians know what the issue is about, and let's resolve it. You know, I'm hopeful that, you know, they're going to make a lot of progress this session. But again, I don't want to put a deadline on them. I wanted people on this panel to many of whom are bringing a fresh set of eyes, and many of whom have been in the discussions on the rural health care issue over the last year, and I think those are valuable perspectives for them to have. So I'm excited about the work they're going to do.
Do you think that not only look at CON, but also other health access issues like insurance coverage and things like that?
Well, I think that's going to depend on what the legislation that members bring forward. You know, you can never know. I do anticipate there will be some CON legislation, and whether there are other things that might come under appropriately come under this committee, I think we'll just have to wait and see.
When you look at the work of the Rural Council and the recommendations that just came out, are there any things that you feel like you're going to prioritize coming out of the council, whether it's rural broadband or the hospitals, or there's going to probably be a lot of legislation coming out of it. What priorities do you feel like for those people outside of Atlanta?
I think that broadband is foundational to so much of what we're attempting to do to revitalize rural Georgia. It's foundational in the sense of being critical to education, business, medicine, and until we bring it to rural Georgia, I think we're always going to operate at a handicap in those areas. So they're all important measures. I think that one's a very, very important one. Health care and access to quality health care is obviously important. A ready workforce is important. So those are all very important, and I really kind of hate to pick and choose in terms of level of importance.
In the end, with rural broadband, is that going to be possibly money coming through a state agency? Is it going to be letting the EMCs do broadband? Is it credits? Is it what's happening with putting fiber into the interstates? What is that going to look like?
Well, they're still sort of looking at various options on the legislation now. I think there's a fair likelihood you could have more than one of those solutions, depending on the region and so forth. So I'm not, wedded to one approach. Whatever is going to be the most effective is what I'm for.
The
Yeah.
Rural Development Council has proposed that they are taking another crack at the universal communications tax. And Representative Powell had said that he wanted that money to go toward rural broadband.
Right.
Do you support using that money? First, you support the tax, but also, would you support using that money in that way?
I would. I think that's an appropriate use of it because I think rural broadband is that important to all the areas that I just mentioned. And, Chairman Powell and Chairman England have done, great work. They've been around the state and they've met with all the different leaders in many communities, and so I can't say enough about the quality of their work, and I'm going to respect that as we go through the process.
Would you then also support a constitutional amendment, dedicate the money, since the legislature can't dedicate without work?
Well, that gets into a little bit of a different discussion. Chairman Powell probably does. I haven't really gone that far, James. I think it's important that we keep our commitment to the people of Georgia. If we're going to use this for rural broadband, then I think we ought to use it, and it may be appropriate for us to take a look at an amendment. I'm not going to rule it out of hand.
Governor Kemp has talked about $5,000 state raise.
Mhm.
Wondering what you feel the support in the House would be for that, and any other educational priorities that you see?
Well, I think a point that needs to be made in the discussion on that proposal is that we have taken some significant steps over the last 4 years under Governor Deal to make our teacher compensation more competitive here in Georgia. We've had I think a couple of significant pay increases. So I think that's kind of the backdrop that we have to operate under. This one is, we've had some discussions with the incoming administration about that, and they're aware of my concerns in terms of the cost to the state and in terms of doing this. There are different ways that we can get to where we want to go. One way may be to graduate a pay increase over a period of time, so as to sort of mitigate the hit to the budget. I don't think anyone is opposed to doing all we can to make sure that we pay our teachers competitively. It's just a question of, what can we do within our means and how quickly can we do it.
If y'all let me pause just a second, I'm getting a text from my room that I can't see. Sorry about that.
Speaker Russell, on HIV, Georgia has the highest rate of HIV diagnoses in the state.
I'm sorry, can you?
On HIV, Georgia has the highest rate of new diagnoses in the state in the country, as any state in the country. I was wondering if you see the House playing any part in fighting that epidemic, whether it's funding the Department of Health for testing and prevention or anything else.
You started out, I could hear you, and then your voice dropped in volume.
Sorry, the Georgia has the highest rated new HIV
Right.
diagnoses in the state. Do you
Right.
see the House playing any role in fighting the epidemic?
Well, I think we have to certainly take a look at that within our health expenditures, and along with other health issues that are out there. And I'm certainly open to having some discussion about what we can do to tackle that. It is a problem. It's a serious issue, and it's one that I think we can't turn a blind eye to.
One of the biggest issues, especially coming out of
The election was voting machines and funding of voting machines, because I think no matter what side you're on, most people can agree something needs to be done. So where do you think we're going to find that funding, and what legislation do you think we might see to address that issue?
Well, I know that it's a very timely question because the Secretary's Commission is meeting today and is going to adopt some recommendations. And I'm not sure exactly what they're going to look like, but I'm as interested as I know y'all are in seeing what they come up with. I think that it's, we have to prioritize making sure that we have an election system in Georgia that's accurate, that has integrity. One of the things that I was most disappointed in all of the rhetoric last year was how we got a kind of a bloody nose, as it were, nationally, and I think that was unfair to Georgia. But whatever we need to do we're going to have to keep up with the technology. That's number one, and whether that's going to be a touch screen with a paper backup, I don't know. I mean, we're going to wait and see on that.
Speaker Wilson, to continue on voting, Democrats are going to have bills, like, for example, to get rid of how voters are purged for inaction, things like that. When you see some of these bills that are going to address other aspects of voting, what's your approach to that? Do you see any other changes we need to make to voting besides the voting machine issue?
I don't really. I think we have, someone asked me yesterday if I thought we needed a sort of a major reform of our election laws here in Georgia, and I don't think we do at this point. I think that we have a sound system. We had a very hotly contested race here in the state last year, and folks start trying to look for reasons that things happen, and sometimes somebody just wins and somebody comes in second, and that's kind of hard to accept sometimes, but it's true. Having come in second before, I know that.
Chip, if I can talk for a second, I want to talk about the waivers. Are there any details that you've heard, proposals, ideas that you think might pass legislation?
I've heard a little discussion about a work requirement. That might have could get some traction. I know the governor-elect has talked about going the waiver route, but I haven't seen the specifics of that, and I anticipate that we'll learn more about that next week in the state of the state, and when we see some of his legislative proposals be unveiled.
Can we get back to education a little bit and talk about some issues you think, we talked a little about teacher pay, but other education issues, particularly school security, mental health issues within schools?
Excellent question. As you know, last year was the first year we had ever appropriated state funding for school safety here in Georgia. And we appropriated $16 million to be allocated among all the school systems here in the state to harden the physical assets of schools. We've had a school safety study committee that's been working since April on this issue, and they're going to bring back recommendations. And we had some excellent people on that study committee. That's a priority for me. And mental health is a priority this session. I think we have to recognize that we have not given that issue sufficient attention, resources for a long, long time, and we're going to have to do that. I don't know yet exactly what form. We're kind of working through that, but that's an issue that I really believe we're going to have to make a priority here in the state.
The Senate has been driving this idea of the state taking over Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, or barring that, at least have an oversight, maybe like a MARCOC type committee overseeing procurement. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I have not yet met with Senator Jones. I know he's reached out to me, and just scheduling, we haven't been able to talk for me to kind of find out what his case might be for that. I'm a little I'm not ready to embrace a takeover. You know, from what my understanding is that everybody's kind of in agreement that the airport is operated pretty well. They're concerned about the corruption issue. Well, if that's the concern, then we've got law enforcement, we've got prosecutors, and I say let's turn them loose to do what they need to do. But I don't know that you change the entire system because of some bad actors. Yeah, Jim.
The Rural Development Council's concerns about an issue of possible transparency, and can you talk about what the tie-in is there to rural Georgia?
Well, they are concerned about some of the nonprofits in terms of what they're doing with their reserves, how much reserves they have, and should they continue to be given a sort of a different tax treatment, and so they felt, the members of that council felt pretty strongly that it was time to build in an accountability step in that, and so that was kind of the reason that they went in that direction, and I support that, frankly.
How have your conversations been with Lieutenant Governor-elect, and what kind of leader do you think he's going to be?
Well, he was given good training. I know that as a member of the House of Representatives. We've had some great discussions. I think he's going to be a very fine lieutenant governor, and I look forward to working with him.
Governor-elect Kemp says that he would like to sign a mirror image of the federal religious freedom bill. Do you support that, and do you think there's support from your House members?
I'm not sure how much support there is among House members. My view is that this is a much different world than it was in 1993 or whenever the President Clinton signed that. I'm pretty much on record, as all of you know, of being very concerned that is solution in search of a problem. I'm even more concerned that it's the kind of issue that has real potential to divide us as a state. We've got so much good going on here in Georgia now in terms of job growth and lifting up our educational system and working in a very diligent way on the problems in rural Georgia. I would just ask us to pause before we get into an issue that I think has the potential to sort of tear the fabric of the state and look at the experience of some other states that have dealt with this. There's not much in those experiences that I want us to imitate, frankly.
Right now, calling for the state legislature to change the law that protects Confederate monuments to allow communities to have their own input about what happens. Where do you see potential legislation? Would that happen, do you think, this year?
I have not really heard any discussion about monument legislation this session. I know that that issue got a lot of attention a year or so back. That's not to say there can't be a bill out there, but I think here again, that's one of those issues that, we had an African American female who came really close to being elected governor of Georgia. If that doesn't speak to the progress that we have made as a state, I'm not sure what does. But I'm not aware of any. I mean, I know in the past there's been different approaches to taking to the monument issue, but I'm not aware that anybody's going to make that a priority this session.
Mr. Speaker, there's been some discussion about replacing the Talmadge Bridge in Savannah. Can you speak to that?
Well, I think that's a little bit unique in that I'm not sure it was ever properly named the Talmadge Bridge to begin with. I would give deference to what the local community down there to their thoughts, but more importantly, I think we have to ask ourselves at some point, kind of where does this end? I mean, do you take Senator Russell's name off of an office building in Washington, D.C.? So I'm not sure that is a debate that drives us forward as a state, frankly.
School safety, I've heard a lot of lawmakers say that school safety was a priority, but I haven't heard anyone say, I know it will be a multifaceted approach, but I haven't heard any say what, one or two things they think will help tackle school safety. Do you have one or two things that kind of rise to the top?
Well, stay tuned for the School Safety Study Committee report from the House. And I think they're going to have more than one or two things. But it is multifaceted. I mean, it's there is the issue of what do we do about our assets as in the schools, how school design. I was, in fact, last fall, as I was traveling around the state, I was in an elementary school in rural southwest Georgia, and they're already doing some redesigning doors. Little things like that matter.
Representative Stevens recommended last year that the state raise the tax on cigarettes. We've got one of the lowest in the country. This issue has come up periodically at the General Assembly. Do you see that as becoming an issue, a possible viable issue in this session?
I don't plan for it to become a viable issue, and I'll tell you one reason why. I mean, my favorite newspaper had a headline a couple of days ago that smoking cigarettes now is at the lowest level ever in this country, which means that, which suggests to me that that would be not a dependable revenue stream, and so I'm always hesitant to suggest raising taxes in any event, and even on that. So I've not heard that he's going to bring that bill back, nor has anyone else.
Medical marijuana cultivation.
I'm sorry?
And medical marijuana cultivation, is this something the House is going to be behind this year? Do you see it maybe finally moving through the other chamber?
We had again a study committee over the interim, as some of you followed, with Representative Micah Gravely working with a group of representatives along with their counterparts on the Senate, and they have come back. They have already returned their report, and they've recommended a very detailed proposal. I haven't had an opportunity to read it yet, but I'm generally familiar with its content, and it's something that I think can certainly be the beginning of a discussion. We were all very pleased when we passed the medical cannabis law that Representative Peake championed a few years ago, but it became kind of an empty promise, as it were, when it's very difficult to obtain the substance. So I anticipate that's going to be the subject of some discussion, and I know there are those who feel that strongly in the other direction, that we're opening it up, a gateway drug, and breaking down even more barriers to its being illegal. So, but I think you'll see a bill, and I think you'll hear a lot of discussion about that.
Mr. Speaker, that special session in the last year, how about the folks down
Right.
in Southwest Georgia? Can you update us on how things are progressing with that?
I'm told that they're coming along really well, and many of the farmers are rebounding slowly but surely. The pecan farmers are obviously going to be behind the timeline because of the time period involved in planting the tree and then it being able to harvest the pecans. But the vegetable farmers, I think, are coming back, frankly, a little quicker than I had expected, and so I think spirits seem to be a little more buoyant than they were in the immediate aftermath, and I think, frankly, not that it was a great magic wand, and it certainly wasn't everything that's needed, but I think the people of that part of the state appreciated that we came back into session and we took tangible steps to deal with their losses at the lowest point of their lives, and I think they appreciated that.
Are you concerned that there might be, because of the federal shutdown, there might be any holdup with federal funds being allocated in that area? And do you have any other concerns from the shutdown of any, really in any area?
Well, obviously, we all hope the shutdown ends soon. I don't know how you can say that you're not concerned. It doesn't seem like we're getting closer to a resolution. So if anything that potentially could hold up federal assistance would greatly alarm me. We've got a lot of parks here in the state and obviously federal properties. Most of the county I live in is owned by the federal government, and so there are a lot of functions that as this thing moves on in time, we start getting into a real hazardous time.
Is there anything imminently that you're concerned about on that front?
Well, I'm concerned first of all about the people that are not going to get paychecks tomorrow, many of whom live here in Georgia, and that's obviously the first worry that I have, and I'm concerned about airport security, obviously. That's pretty high up on the list. Concerned about the disaster assistance for Southwest Georgia. So I think we have a lot of things to be concerned about.
Speaker, one of the things that Georgia got known for under Governor Deal was criminal justice reforms. And on the campaign trail, Governor-elect Kemp talked a lot about addressing gang violence, a lot of language that suggests increasing penalties, increasing the sorts of people that get put into the criminal justice system. What is your sense of how Georgia might shift its trajectory when it comes to criminal justice reforms, and what kind of approach the state takes?
Well, first of all, I applaud Governor Deal, and was one of the great things about his administration for me was being able to work with him on criminal justice reform. That will be a legacy of which he can be very, very proud, and the state can take great pride in. So that was a huge positive step for us as a state. I don't think, though, that the sort of the distinction here is the kind of crimes for which the sentencing reform applies never were intended to apply to violent crimes, violence against others, and so I don't think there's any inconsistency there. I mean, criminal justice reform was to get at a wide range of criminal conduct, obviously, but it was sort of, drug possession, not drug trafficking, drug usage, and so, but it was never intended to bring leniency for crimes of violence against others, such as you described.
And do you see the state continuing to invest in things like drug courts and other of these sorts of alternative systems that have been part of deferring people from being incarcerated and giving them alternative routes to addressing their behavior?
Do I see what now?
Do you see the state continuing to continuing to invest in like drug courts and
Oh,
some of these
yes.
other alternative systems that have been created?
Yeah, when the drug court concept was introduced in the court system, probably, 16, 18 years ago, I was a skeptic. It was so far out of the box that I couldn't comprehend. I kind of came up in an era when, you went to court, you won or you lost. And I'm like, both sides can win? I mean, what's that about? So I was a skeptic for a year or two until I attended a drug court graduation. And if you've never had an opportunity to attend one, I recommend going. it is a eye-opening experience that will, you'll be better for it.
We had a sting with regard to sex trafficking, specifically at a hotel property that they hadn't been better able to manage. Do you, including child sex trafficking as young as 12, do you see any potential for the legislature to look at specifically regulating hotels and their responsibility to help manage that, as that's a rising problem in Georgia?
Haven't really thought about that being a state function. I think the state will certainly continue to do what it has done, which is provide assistance through the GBI and our other law enforcement agencies in terms of investigating criminal conduct wherever it may be, whether it's a hotel, motel, or wherever. I think that's something that we need to do and will continue to do.
Did you take any guidance or any strategy for Republicans from the last election in terms of Democratic gains and Republican losses? It being one of the closest gubernatorial races in recent history. Does that cause you to worry differently, or do you think you approach this session?
I think you always look for ways that you can do better. You know, even if you even during times when you win, I think it's always good to go back and sort of do an autopsy, as it were, to find out what we did right, what we did wrong. So I think that you know, the process is no different now than it has been. We've always done that, and we'll continue to do that. And you know, we have to recognize Georgia's a very competitive state, but regardless of that competitiveness, you know, it's still a Republican state, and we have a solid majority in the House and the Senate, every constitutional officer. So while we are at this point, I think it would be a good time to always look to the future and ask ourselves, you know, what do we need to prepare for? What can we do better? Where were mistakes that we made? And break down the game film, as it were.
Hate crimes legislation.
I'm sorry?
There was some movement on hate crimes legislation last session. Do you foresee that getting any traction this year, especially with Georgia?
It could. Representative Megan Hansen, who will not be back this session at least, did a great job on that last session. I'm not sure who will pick up the torch and follow, but I wouldn't be surprised if somebody doesn't introduce a bill, and we'll take that through the process and have a discussion.
What about HB 930, the ATL, the New Transit Agency? Do you think it might be time for an appropriation rather than just bonds, a regular appropriation, a budget line for Metro Atlanta Transit?
Well, we have put money in the budget now, a couple of budget cycles, and again, to the extent that we can make investments in that, I'm open to doing that. I think we have come a great distance in the past 4 years in making transit a critical part of our transportation policy here in Georgia. Going back to the funding that we put in the budget in 2015, which was the first time the state had ever invested in transit. And then we did an investment this past session, and then we created the ATL. So, you know, I don't, it's probably a little early to talk about whether that will become part of the budget every cycle. But to the extent that we do have resources, I think that's a critical part of our infrastructure that needs to be dealt with.
Speaker, please forgive me, this is not a legislative question, but I just have to take opportunity. It seems like some of us have lost swipe card access to the Capitol. And I'm wondering if you have any advice for us in seeing about if we could get that back or not.
I haven't had that problem. Would somebody check that for us? We try anything to keep y'all out of here, so we'll check on that.
For our last couple of questions.
Yeah, Richard?
Could you just talk in general terms about the transition between administrations now, Governor Deal and Governor-elect Kemp, how it's been going? For many years, you and the Deal administration have worked hand in glove getting things passed. Could you just talk about how things are now pushing forward with a new set of people?
Yeah, the transition seems to be going well. The more transitions I observe, the more I'm amazed at what a large undertaking that is. I mean, you go from a hotly contested race that ends in November to putting together a state government that needs to move in and take over in January. I mean, that's a lot of work. But I give both Governor Deal and Governor-elect Kemp tremendous credit. They have worked well together. Governor Deal and his staff have been very, very accommodating, very gracious in terms of helping ease the transition, and I think that Governor-elect Kemp has shown great appreciation and respect for that. So I think it's going well. I really do.
Speaker, two unrelated questions. One, another promise that Governor-elect Kemp made was to pass some of the strictest abortion laws in the nation. Do you see that happening, or how do you see that unfolding here at the Capitol?
Well, we have some very strong pro-life laws on the books now. So I'm not sure. I'd have to see specifically what he's going to propose before I'd want to comment on that.
Ralston, moving back to impacts of the shutdown, one specific one we didn't touch on was the Department of Agriculture, which obviously affects Georgia farmers through some of the subsidies to offset tariffs, but it also runs the SNAP school lunch program for students on free and reduced lunches. If that shutdown does not cease in the imminent future, do you think there's a place for the legislature to step in quickly to ensure that those students have the access to food during their school day?
I just find it impossible to believe that the federal government is going to let this thing get to that point. And having said that, I've been surprised before. I can assure you that if they don't do their job, we'll do something to make sure that school children in Georgia do have lunch.
Mr. Speaker, coming off, as you called it, a hotly contested election, and then what you have happening in Washington, how do you set a tone in the House day one, first week, when you come off an election like that, when you do have you do have new House members, Democratic House members, whose charge from voters was to try to make changes, even though they're the minority? How do you set a tone?
Well, you can come Monday and watch how I'm planning to do it. I'm a great believer that Georgians are like everybody else. They appreciate a good election fight. We had a good election fight. It's over. We had a winner. We had someone that came in second. Now that is over, I think they expect us to govern. They don't expect shenanigans, and they don't expect a circus act, but they expect us to work on making schools better in Georgia. They expect public safety to be the absolute best it can be in Georgia. They expect us to work on infrastructure. And so I think that for the people who go to work, raise a family, pay their taxes, and maybe they don't have time to go to a political meeting every week or a political rally every week, but they're really making this state go. And that's the Georgians that I'm here to represent. And I think they want us to work, and I think they want us to work together as much as we can. So, and we'll talk about that tone. I think it's an important point that you bring up, and we'll talk about that on Monday. And we're going to have a good day and kick off a good session.
Can I ask you a cultural question, which I'm not sure if you'll have the answer to, but I'd love to hear your insights.
Cultural question?
About
you know where I live?
Well, no, the culture here. So going off of Patrick's comments about HIV being a huge issue, in the past I've noticed that when bills related to HIV, STDs, sexual and reproductive health come up, a lot of folks down here tend to get a little bit squeamish or uncomfortable. I remember there were jokes about one of the bills being like a buddy bill. That was supposed to be a bill that was meant to help address the spread of certain STDs by increasing access to medication. And there was a lot of discomfort around it. I'm wondering if you've observed the same thing and sort of what you think of what the culture is here in the state capitol around addressing sexual and reproductive health.
First of all, I have never observed, I like that word, squeamish behavior about that, those bills or that issue. And it's my sense that all of the members that I have discussion with on this, that they view this as a very, very serious issue. And I would find it to be extremely offensive for someone to make light of or joke about legislation on this. It's too important. I'm not sure I agree with the sort of the predicate, I guess, of your question. I have not observed that, and nor would I tolerate it.
Let's do a final question.
You say the budget every year. You say every year that the budget's your biggest priority, but anything else that's really your biggest priority moving forward?
Oh, I've got a few things other than the budget. Rural broadband, access to health care in rural Georgia, school safety. Those are three that come to mind, and we can move on those and do the budget. Then I'll be happy when we adjourn, whenever that may be.
Thank y'all.